Alrighty, here. Hi, everyone. We are back. My name is Chaand.
I'm Shikha.
And yeah, we are Somatic Astrology, and we are continuing on this series of studying natural astrology or the natural archetypes in astrology. And now we're coming to one of our favorite episodes, or maybe our favorite episodes of Gemini and Sagittarius. So, the axis of Gemini and Sagittarius. And real quickly, a little bit about ourselves. Shikha is an astrologer, an evolutionary astrologer, and you can find information about her in the description below, open for readings. Highly recommend. And I am an internal medicine physician, and currently now trying to, I guess, like deepen my practice in holistic medicine, specifically somatic practices, somatic experiencing, and this is how we are birthing somatic astrology off, as above, so below, and with the astrology part and with the somatic part and holistic healing part, I believe like that can be really powerful for people. So that said, I guess let's just start, Shikha.
Yeah, let's get into the zodiac wheel to view the polarity of Gemini and Sagittarius.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good segue to kind of mention that we are now on the end of the first quarter, which is the first three houses. So, as a refresher, the zodiac wheel starting on the first house is divided into four quarters with three houses each. And each of these quarters are a specific phase in the evolution of the soul. And this has been when the soul is kind of learning about itself. So, it's like self understanding, and this will be self application. And so, we're on the third house now. We already did Aries and Taurus, and here in the Gemini, again, these are going to be mutable signs. So both Gemini and Sagittarius are at the end of their respective quarters. And the end of their respective quarter is where transition is happening, which is where the mutable sign comes in. And so this is the axis that we'll be talking about today. All right, Shikha, I guess I'm going to go to the slide for Gemini and please lead us.
Yeah, like Chan said, we did Aries and Libra, then Taurus and Scorpio, and this theme that they had in similar was discovery of self versus discovery of self in relationships, because both Aries and Taurus are self-focused signs, and Libra and Scorpio are relational signs. The mutable signs are always very different, like you mentioned before transitioning to the next quadrant. The theme quite changes for each of the mutable signs. So now we are moving away from self versus other in relationships to the intellectual axis. Gemini, Sagittarius, this is the intellectual axis of the soul. Aries is the spark of discovery. Taurus is finding our values and grounding ourselves in them. And now it is intellectual discovery through both data analysis and intuitive knowing. And that's what we're going to discuss today. So, Gemini, ruled by Mercury, natural home is a third house. Um, and we would also, of course, like to take some time to dispel the Gemini hate around why Geminis are like this, they are like that. We see a lot of that on social media. But Gemini is just a really curious sign. And, the saying about cats that get curious. um, so it's a curious sign because this is the soul exploring the world and labeling things. And we had talked about this another time that the Tao Te Ching actually opens with the Gemini Sagittarius polarity because the Tao is both the naming of 10,000 things, and the Tao can also not be named because language has its constraints, has limits. You cannot fully understand something once you label it. But at the same time, labeling is important to make sense of our reality, of our experience, which is why Gemini's function is to navigate reality. It is to scan our internal and external environments, which is our immediate environments, to make sense of what's happening, what exists, what's going on, and to make logical connections, to collect data, process it, and then communicate it back, which is why Geminis are known to be good speakers or writers, at least thinkers. So this is the communicative sign. Anything you wanted to add about Gemini?
No, thanks for that. I think I agree. From Ari Moshe's book, The few excerpts that I had, one of them was that this is a Gemini archetype represents how each soul is orienting to life through the mind. And I mean, again, with my sun and Gemini, that does really like relate to me also, which is like there's always this eagerness to learn more and to just keep like reading and learning and trying different things, multiple different things. It's sort of like you had mentioned earlier also at some point that kind of like the original internet is to like collect information and make those connections, making those interconnections. Because I guess like Gemini understands that everything is connected. Like the archetype understands that okay, everything is connected. So if I understand a little bit about this, and then I can understand a little bit about this, I can understand the connection about how these are all connected. And then I guess relaying that to people that hey, all of this is connected. And I think I can like say that very typically the energy, the hate, the Gemini hate is probably coming from. I honestly have never understood it. Right, I've never understood it. I think there's been something about people being two-faced, like like this in this beautiful diagram, like which is just which doesn't make any sense if you really understand the archetypes. Like that's not what Gemini is about. So I don't know where this started. I don't know how this started. How this like myth spread. But do you have any like thoughts about that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, like you mentioned earlier, by the way, for those who are listening in, both of us are Sun in Gemini. We are the same birthday. And I have a 4 planet Gemini stellium. You have a 3 planet Gemini stellium. And mine includes Mercury in Gemini. Um, so the two-faced thing about Gemini is, yeah, so where it could come from is the fact that Gemini is actually one of the least, if not the least, judgmental signs. It is pure curiosity. Gemini doesn't judge. So it will listen to multiple perspectives with equal importance. And that can rub people off the wrong way sometimes. Like, hey, if you agree with me, why are you listening to the other person? Especially if there's conflict. Gemini has the capacity to listen to all sides of an argument, and that doesn't sit well with some people.
Got it. Yeah, yeah, I agree, and I almost see that more as a Libran archetype of being able to like find balance. But it's interesting that you say that because it's like this. I think the idea of duality is how Gemini is one of the the archetype which starts understanding and navigating duality. And hence, I think this is what the archetype represents. I believe, right? The diagram is representing duality rather than two-faced, which is a very. It's just it doesn't make any sense to me. I never understood that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's very reductive.
it's pretty rough. Could be that maybe Geminis have a lot of friends. I don't know. Maybe we have like friends from different. The archetype is able to connect with people across various backgrounds. Uh, but yeah, that's kind of what comes to me. And the other thing which comes to me also is uh, like you mentioned, like this the need to classify data, the need to label. It's definitely something that I've recognized within me, and I'm sure like in general this archetype is wants to label things, wants to be like okay, which is really useful, I believe, to kind of okay, this is this, and this is the connection between these two supposedly different things. So it's interesting, like there is a labeling, but the labeling is being done to make a connection between them.
Yeah, I think that comes up a lot, especially in psychotherapy, because labeling of behaviors is important, but at the same time, boxing people in into certain syndromes or disorders, for example, doesn't help. That is reductive. That's where language has its constraints. So both, like the Tao Te Ching says, both labeling is important and understanding that labeling does not capture all dimensions of reality is also important. And that's where the Sagittarius intuitive knowing comes in. And I think now we can move into Sagittarius from here.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good bridge into Sagittarius. I did want to say something about the Gemini right before we moved in was that this mental curiosity uh, and just, the it can cause information overload. I think Gemini, the archetype will in general be sensitive to social media, um, like short form content. Like I think that can create like a lot of load on the mind. And the one thing that personally I've also recognized, and I read this also, that for Gemini, because Gemini is trying to learn about everything, right? But and a great way is to read, a great way is to experience, is to learn, is to try different things. Another great way is to actually rest and calm the mind, so that all of that can actually get absorbed, and yeah, the inner knowledge comes out, which I feel now is probably leading us into Sagittarius, uh, which again, I personally have been fascinated by this archetype, like just the Jupiter, the ninth house, and Sagittarius. About it just seems like expansive. That's the generally the sense that comes from you. But yeah, lead us through this.
Yeah, so Gemini's function is to map reality, to scan our immediate environments. Sagittarius is the archer that's shooting the arrow into the distance. Doesn't know where it will land, but they'll just explore wherever it lands. And that's why it is expansive. And Jupiter is also associated with being jovial. So you'll find Sagittarius folks are usually funny, they have a good sense of humor, they're jovial usually. I have Jupiter in the ninth house, but in Gemini again. Um, so that Sagittarius Gemini polarity for me is, I think one of because my chart is full of polarities, but this integration comes the most naturally to me, to take data and then classify into meaning. That is what Sagittarius is. It's not about random facts. It's not about logic. It's about gnosis. That's direct experience of the world and directly knowing what the truth is. Sagittarius represents an eternal quest for the truth. They're always seeking the capital T truth, because it's Sagittarius represents our personal philosophy. What do we believe in? Our personal cosmology. What is life about? What is the universe about? So this represents the higher mind, and Gemini, that's why it's known as the lower mind. But both are equally important, of course. And as it because it represents our personal philosophy, um, it also brings faith and meaning. So wherever we have Jupiter in a chart, for example, that's where we will naturally find faith and meaning, whichever house, whichever sign it is in. Because my Jupiter is in Gemini, I naturally find faith and meaning in its polarity, in research, in listening to multiple perspectives. So there's a lot of expansiveness, like you said, that comes from Sagittarius. A lot of the curiosity here is about the unknown, to
Hmm.
just like go into the unknown and see where that takes us.
Yeah, no, this and again, just from my personal interactions with people who kind of embody the Sagittarius archetype, or in general, because we're not trying to uh, equate people to science, or science to people, but that still sometimes happens, because there are some archetypes which just like in certain behaviors they really come forth. And yeah, it kind of like exactly like, in the book, he says that the Gemini will start ranting about, hey, did you read about this and then this? And, oh, do you know, like, this plant does this and then this animal does this and they're connected. And the Sagittarius is going to go, well, great, but what is the meaning of this all? Sagittarius wants to get to the meat of, like, hey, can you tell me, like, what is the higher meaning in this? While Gemini is really fascinated in just the facts and also in the trivia. And so I find it fascinating how Sagittarius is kind of like the explorer in that kind of sense, like exploration, experimentation, maybe even. Uh, and uh, and it's interesting because this sign is also associated with being the philosopher and the teacher, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Gemini is known as the student, and we're talking about that. How both
Yep.
of us relate with the archetype of the eternal student,
Eternal student.
and
Yeah.
Sagittarius is the teacher. And sometimes they also become the preacher, which is a shadow expression, but it
Mm,
comes from wanting to share their truth, share their cosmology with people.
cosmology with people. Yeah. No. Uh, exactly. And I think this might be a good segue now to like kind of move into the shadow expressions. What do you think?
Yeah, I do want to take a minute to share that Jeff Green, who founded this method of evolutionary astrology, was a Sagittarius sun. Also, Pluto in the ninth house, which made him a Sagittarius soul. Um, and if you've seen his videos, I don't know, like I did not know that he was Sagittarius. It was so obvious that he was
Obviously.
Sagittarius because he just did not give a fuck.
Yeah, he didn't. He really didn't. You
He
know,
didn't.
yeah, it's really interesting you saying this. So because the other day I randomly met someone right at this party at this house party, and this person was it was so interesting. Was talking We were talking all about philosophy and all esoteric things, um and then also the person showed that they were wearing jewelry, a lot of jewelry, and they were like, hey, this jewelry is from Thailand, this is from this part of the world, this is from that part of the world. And I was like, oh, very cool. And then eventually we were like, hey, I was like, hey, let's just, like, we were talking about astrology, like, can I just, do you want me to see your chart? And they were like, sure. Like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And we looked like massive stellium in the ninth house. And I was like, okay, that kind of makes a lot of sense because you're literally embodying that, likes to travel, but not for just as a tourist, to actually travel with meaning, to actually try and like learn about yourself and the world. It's kind of like meaningful exploration in that kind of sense. And very interested in, learning about different things, and philosophy in that kind of sense.
Yeah,
So
I
it's,
relate to that a lot because I have a ninth house stellium and travel is big for me. I don't do local travel like daily public life participation, no, which I need to do because but we'll talk about that in the Cancer Capricorn episode. But long distance travel has always been an important part for me, especially to go and immerse myself in another culture and learn their ways of life. Traveling to far off places on my own.
mm,
That was like a defining period of my life, especially in my 20s. And now I've settled in a little bit and my feet are itching. I gotta go soon somewhere.
yeah,
Hopefully
I
we'll
think
soon.
that's actually a good point, because the other kind of general understanding about Sagittarius is that they like to travel. Like, let's just like talk about, like, in pop astrology, people say Sagittarius likes to travel. Is it always physical travel? Is this travel, like, can you just expand a little bit on that?
So it is not travel, it is about expanding your horizon. And the external manifestation of the archetype looks like long distance travel, but it can also be just like reading a lot of books and your mind taking you to different places. And that's also how I grew up. I read a lot of books as a child, still do because Gemini, but it's not reading for the sake of reading. I'm always looking for meaning. Um, it's like at the age of 16, I knew what kind of a parent I want to be, for example, because I read To Kill a Mockingbird and now I want to be Atticus Finch. Um, so it takes you to different places in your own head.
That's very cool, because I definitely know, like, not every Sagittarius, or like, person who has a lot of Sagittarius energy will always be like, hey, yeah, I love to travel. That's just not going to be. And I think that's another thing where it's like, the social kind of structure, socioeconomic structure kind of dictates how certain interpretations of the archetypes happen, where it's just become about taking a flight ticket and just traveling. So somebody who loves to travel, oh, they're Sagittarius. Like, no, not really. Because it's not really, like you mentioned, it's the external manifestation, but what is the essence? And the essence is exploration. The essence is expanding the horizon of the mind, which is what I guess is one of the things which has been fascinating for me. And even what I'm hoping that we can share is kind of like talking about the essence of the archetype rather than just reductive behaviors or, modern interpretations which have come from, in the last 70 to 100 years under capitalism, which can be a little limiting. They can be, obviously they matter also, because it is what it is kind of thing. But getting to the essence to really understand the energetic profile of the archetypes. Uh, Anything
Yeah,
else?
for example, like I have friends with prominent Sagittarius placements. One of them is a Sagittarius moon, and she hates travel. So the point is to not reduce anyone to one or two signs. That's not what the human personality is about. It's highly complex. Each chart has all 12 archetypes, and it just really depends on to what degree, how many planets in each sign or in what house. For example, this reading that I did of a friend of yours who is sun in Aries, but Aries is the least dominant energy in their chart. It's actually Pisces, which is nothing like Aries. So one or two signs really don't, like, they don't tell us anything about that person, and that's why we want to move away from pop astrology and the Gemini demonization in general.
No, that's actually a very good point because I mean, I guess the point here is that yes, for from what I understand, and please feel free to correct me, that for whatever reason, the sun, the placement of the sun really does matter. It does really give, like, it has a lot of energy, and so that can, like, a lot of people can relate very strongly with where the sun is in the natal chart. But I've also read that it kind of depends on the timing of birth. Some people born, like, I don't know, like closer to midnight r- might relate more with the opposite sign and something like that. I believe it was in Judith Hill's book where it said, well, even simplistically, list looking at just the sun sign, it won't always correlate. But like you're mentioning, the whole idea has been just everything focusing on the sun sign limits, like, the actual nuance of yeah, that nuance and that honest exploration of what the chart is of this person is. The example that you gave is actually it's like a really good one. Like, somebody with that kind of energy, one will, oh, you look in Aries, like, what, doesn't make any sense to me. I'm reading about Aries and it doesn't make any sense to me. Well, yeah, of course, because your energy is probably going to be more Pisces. Cool. You want to move towards the shadow expressions?
Yeah, let's talk about how their strengths become their compulsions and how they balance each other. So yeah, Gemini loves data and facts and communication, but what happens is we can never quiet our own minds. Like, it's constant dialogue, constant inner dialogue. And I mean, I have my Sagittarius friends who get triggered by that, just by the amount of how much data I can consume. And that's like very triggering to Sagittarius, because Sagittarius doesn't want to rely on so many perspectives, and there is value in that. There's value in in getting in touch with the intuition. Gemini has issues with intuition. Gemini shadow is being overly dependent on multiple sources of data. But at the same time, the strength of Sagittarius becomes their weakness, because they can be so dogmatic that they won't listen to multiple perspectives. They're very judgmental. Gemini does not judge. Everything is welcome, like your worst experiences or your darkest secrets. Everything will be heard without judgment. But Sagittarius will, associate meaning to all of that, and it can get judgy. And Sagittarius's growth comes from listening to multiple perspectives. Like Gemini's growth comes from leaning into intuition and quieting the mind, like you said. The evolutionary goal of Gemini is to reduce their overstimulation, their scattered energy, and to quiet the mind. Sagittarius mind is pretty quiet already, I guess. They could do with listening to a few more voices.
That's very interesting because I agree. I mean, I think for me, like, for some reason, like, Gemini and ADHD, like, just like kind of like the general understanding of Gemini and, like, this this kind of energy which is always trying to, like, collect information and can absolutely get lost. I have seen myself, like, get completely lost in data, completely lost in multiple books which are open. Now I have joined multiple classes, and I have, I'm skipping from one thing to the other, one thing to the other, which, done in, I guess, in a balanced way, will help you from the connections. But otherwise, it's you're skimming so much on the surface that you're not even getting close to the essence of any of the things. And that's the thing that I've realized also. And even Ari Moshe mentions that, it, even for Gemini to kind of anchor, eventually to anchor oneself in a particular area for a certain period of time, and through that learning about everything, still being interested in everything, can be of value. What do you
Yeah,
think about
funny you mentioned about taking a lot of classes, because I am so like that. I quit my marketing job and moved to India to pursue art, because that was before you introduced me to astrology. I thought I was going to be an artist, and I still want to be an artist, by the way. Um, I enrolled. I bought at least like 100 courses. I am not making it up. Like, from all major art self-learning websites a course here, a course there, like 10 courses here, 20 courses there. I'm like, okay, I have a 10-year plan because I'm also Capricorn and it's really long term, but just I cannot help myself. Or when it's like reading articles, I'll have 100 tabs open because I got to consume all of it. But thankfully, because of this internal polarity that I think that I balance well, I'm able to convert all that data into meaning, and I don't get like super lost in just like random facts. But another Gemini shadow expression that I relate to is being argumentative. Um,
Mm.
I I mean now I'm old enough to realize that debate doesn't help. But yeah, when I was younger, I would debate people, and I think that's also why there's a lot of Gemini hate because Geminis tend to win debates, and debates actually don't help. Like who does it help? We don't change anyone's mind through debate, right?
Yeah.
But Gemini, yeah, and they get trapped by logic. And as people talking about esoteric stuff about the occult and cosmology, we know logic is very limiting, right? Like the human brain literally has to filter consciousness to make sense of the human experience. But that's also the limits of our understanding. And that's where the Sagittarius polarity of expansion, expanding our horizon comes in.
No, yeah, thanks for that. Because absolutely, like, I noticed that even me, and that has been definitely been a shadow expression of a lot of my Gemini energy, has been uh, trapped by logic, or trying to like understand things to just through like some kind of rational like logic, when when ultimately what really helped me was so there was a time when I was reading like multiple books at the same time throughout the year. I don't know how many books I read in that year. It was crazy. And it wasn't like a calm reading. It was like a voracious, like sponge kind of absorption. And then there was a year where I was like, I just can't do this right. I literally was like didn't read, and all I did was like meditate. And all I did was just like did qigong, and like it was kind of like all of the stuff that I had taken was finally like sort of like settling inside me, and I was actually able to now I'm trying to get back to reading after like so much like scattered overstimulation is I think. So yeah, definitely I feel personally feel like everyone can benefit from some kind of mindfulness practice, but Gemini, people with a lot of Gemini placements will absolutely benefit from a lot of breath work and like because Gemini also rules the body zone number 3, which is like the lungs, the respiratory system. And it just turns out to be that that is probably maybe one of the conduits. I mean, breath is one of the conduits of calming the mind. So we do a lot of breath work. We're also able to calm the mind, which is why I guess I get into breath work a lot. uh, I don't know, another coincidence. Uh, but yeah, and then finally, like just moving to the shadow expression of Sagittarius, which, like you had already mentioned, can be not looking at another perspective, which will just lean into fanaticism or dogmatism, kind of like blind faith or even like blind optimism, like you mentioned.
Yeah, they're very jovial. So what can happen is like they may not. There's also abstract philosophy. Sagittarius, when we talk about philosophy, it's very abstract philosophy, high philosophy, and they have a lot of faith and meaning in it, right? And that can sometimes be disconnected from reality. But which is where the blind optimism, like, oh, things are going to work out, but you also have to look at reality and constraints, accept limitations, which is like a Saturnine strength, not a Jupiter strength. Jupiter just wants to, yeah, everything's going to work out. So don't
Yeah.
worry about that. But
Mm.
personally, I love that energy. I
Yeah.
love Sagittarius energy.
No, me too. Yeah,
Yeah, like,
definitely. Sagittarius are like you mentioned, like the jokers, like the kind of like
yeah,
clowns. Like I've definitely like seen that, especially with one friend. She's just like hilarious, like prototype, like cartoon energy, and I love that. Like always like people are. I think Sagittarius is just like fun.
yeah.
Uh,
But also arrogance. And that is another shadow that I struggle with my ninth house placements, Jupiter in the ninth house. So really expands even my ninth house Sagittarius themes.
mhm.
I have been told before that I can be arrogant by family, and I don't agree with them a lot, but sometimes family know you better than others, right?
Of course.
So that's something I'm trying to be more conscious um, of intellectual and spiritual arrogance, because when someone pisses me off, my um, line of attack becomes, "Hey, I'm better than you."
Mm,
So that's very Sagittarius as well. They're very arrogant. They don't want to listen to anyone because it's a naturally intelligent sign. So yeah, it's a
Mhm.
struggle. And imagine combining Gemini and Sagittarius. So I really struggle. Yeah. So
So intelligent. So
it's
definitely
yeah. I'm
could,
sorry, that's a problem. My head it
it's a problem.
hurts.
All right.
Uh,
Well,
but
I
also
guess.
the
Mhm.
constant seeking of abstract philosophy can lead to existential crisis and make them sometimes unreliable in philosophy because you're always seeking. Thankfully, my philosophy hasn't changed too much, but yeah, I have moved from being an atheist, Marxist to abolitionist. Then now I am into esotericism. So um, but hopefully again, like not in an inconsistent unreliable way, still making the connections
Yeah.
between all, like, and that's what we'll see in the next slide. I haven't given up my Marxist training because dialectics are still very important to me.
Clearly, like, and which is what I again, likewise, the same vibe with me is like, 'cause it just kind of makes sense, right? Like it's understanding these things in relation to each other, rather than isolated in themselves, because they are, everything is related, ultimately. And the axis, the polarity axis, comparative analysis, comparative understanding, between analysis, which is what the Gemini archetype embodies, and just gnosis, just knowing, be like, hey. And it's almost like it's a seesaw. It's always this interplay between these two things. Like one is going to lead to the other. As you learn about things, you will have more inner knowing. But if you overdo it, then you shut down your inner knowing, and it's kind of done. So, which is why, like, I love this slide particularly about like how it's between data and meaning, information and wisdom, kind of like, and knowing and understanding, which is like, sure, I know, but it's going to be the Sagittarius archetype, which is actually going to help you understand things. Uh, so personally, like, I, again, a big fan of the Sagittarius archetype, just because how I feel like leaning into that kind of energy for me just helps to like, for me it's helping to like, calm down, trust my inner intuition, know that I'm wise already, and how understanding is also important rather than just collecting tons of data.
Yeah, that balance, like I've said earlier, is very important to me because I cannot imagine not finding meaning in all my reading and my research. So the balance between, or the path from analysis to gnosis and knowing to understanding is very important to me as well. And I think we're coming to the end of this episode, which can be a good time to talk about Uranus entering Gemini and affecting all the mutable signs. So Uranus has just entered Gemini, and it started conjuncting my Mercury in Gemini last year. That's when we had that conversation. You introduced me to astrology,
Yeah.
and I get an open mind, and here I am. Less than a year later, we're both becoming astrologers, evolutionary astrologers. We even found this type of astrology that's not even that widely practiced, even in the West, let alone here in this part of the world in India.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Sagittarius does, Jupiter does. When I'm researching, it brings me luck, and
Yep.
Jupiter is known to be lucky. And also, it's intuition that tells me, oh, read that book, click on that link. It's like this
Mm-hmm.
inner
Mm-hmm.
knowing, which is why, in a very short span of time, here we are. Um,
No,
so
absolutely.
Uranus entering Gemini has already done wonders for me. I am so excited for the next 7 years because it can be disruptive, I'm sure, but I am something that I'm learning to practice is to trust transits, especially Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto transits in increasing levels of difficulty. But these three planets bring the most difficult transits because Saturn transits are depressive or heavy. Uranus is sudden shocks, and Pluto just wants you to makes me want to kill myself. Okay, um, but you gotta trust the transits, and the way through Uranus transits is to ensure that you are not stagnating. And this applies to Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, Pisces, and I would also say Scorpio and Capricorn because Gemini forms an inconjunct to Scorpio and Capricorn. The inconjunct is pretty much as intense as like a square. Of course, conjunction with Gemini will be the most powerful experience, followed by opposition to Sagittarius, then squares to Virgo and Pisces, and in conjunct with Scorpio and Capricorn. So if you have placements in any of these signs the next 7 years, depending on what degree your placements are in, be ready to get liberated. And if it feels disruptive at first, that's okay. Breathe through it and trust the transit.
Oh, thank you for that. I think the one thing which people might want to know is like, what could the disruption look like? Is there something that we have to expect?
So there are two parts to this. One is obviously the disruption will happen in our mental processes and our communication because Uranus is in Gemini. Uh, so it's going to bring sudden downloads, sudden awakenings, um, intuitive flashes. Uranus is higher consciousness, and you combine that with the archetype of Gemini, which is research, navigating reality. So that is where it's going to be really disruptive. To take the example, right? Like I was completely anti-astrology, but when Uranus started conjuncting my Mercury, um, you told me about astrology and past lives, and I don't stagnate mentally, which is why it wasn't disruptive in a bad way. It was disruptive in an empowering way, and this whole new world opened up for me. That is the disruption if you're not stagnating. But here is where things can get a little difficult for Sagittarius because Gemini does not tend to stagnate. We are naturally curious. Sagittarius can stagnate in terms of when they become dogmatic. Otherwise, of course, they're also seeking higher philosophy all the time, which is great. But if they become dogmatic, Uranus in Gemini will cause disruptions that will force them to listen to other perspectives. And then, of course, it depends on which house in your chart that is happening. That will also add to the disruptions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that because, like you said, like even I'm like kind of excited about the next 7 years, because I feel like disruption in this sense is kind of like it'll make sure that I stay moving. It'll make sure that mental processes and like ideas, ideologies maybe will just keep like changing, and so disruption not necessarily in a bad way. It can definitely signal growth. And I think this is a good plug to be like, hey, there's so much nuance here depending on one's chart. There's a lot of specificity which you can get from particularly having someone, whether it's Shikha or whether it's like another astrologer, to actually like understand your chart and see which area the transit is probably going to be most active in. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Right, Shikha's open. I personally highly recommend uh, for to get an evolutionary astrology reading if you need someone. You can find the information in the description.
Yeah, thank you. Um,
Yeah,
I'm really excited too.
excellent. Yeah, I don't have any closing thoughts other than the fact that I'm glad that we are moving towards now the next, which will be the final quarter or the next quarter, and so we have 3 more episodes left before we cover all the archetypes, and then we can get into interpretations.
Right. Yeah, I'm really excited too. I'm very excited about the next one as well. Both Taurus, Scorpio, Gemini, Sagittarius have been very important to me personally, but Cancer, Capricorn is important on a whole new level because um, there's a there was an Aries stellium recently, and Saturn and Neptune are still in Aries, and I have a ton of Cancer, Capricorn placements. So very important year, but we'll talk about that next time. You're on mute, sorry.
So yeah, thanks. Yeah, that'll be in the next episode. So please feel free to follow along, like and subscribe, all the good stuff. Comment. I'm telling all my friends to comment to be like, hey, listen, like, can we just like they're like, oh, this was great. I was like, can you please write it in the comments, right? And yeah, I guess like tell us like how are you finding this series? How does it resonate? And what else do you want to know more about evolutionary astrology? With that, we will say goodbye. Thanks,
Yeah,
Shika.
see everyone in the next episode.
Next episode. Bye.
Bye.